Humans have battled viruses before our species had even evolved into its modern form. For some viral diseases, vaccines and antiviral drugs have allowed us to keep infections from spreading widely and have helped sick people recover. For one disease, smallpox, we have been able to eradicate it, ridding the world of new cases. But as the coronavirus outbreak now devastating China demonstrates, we're a long way from winning the fight against viruses. But there are other viruses out there that are equally deadly, and some are even deadlier. Here are then the 10 worst killer viruses based on the likelihood that a person will die if they are infected with one of them. Coronavirus. Coronaviruses were first identified in the 1960s, but we don't know where they come from. They get their name from their crown-like shape. Sometimes, but not often, a coronavirus can infect both animals and humans. Most coronaviruses spread the same way as other cold-causing viruses do, through infected people coughing and sneezing, by touching an infected person's hands or face, or by touching things such as doorknobs that infected people have touched. Almost everyone gets a coronavirus infection, at least one in their life, most likely as a young child. In the United States, coronaviruses are more common in the fall and winter, but anyone can come down with a coronavirus infection at any time. Marburg virus. Scientists identified Marburg virus in 1967 when small outbreaks occurred among lab workers in Germany who were exposed to infected monkeys imported from Uganda. Marburg virus is similar to Ebola in that both can cause hemorrhagic fever, meaning that infected people develop high fevers and bleeding throughout the body that can lead to shock, organ failure and death. The mortality rate in the first outbreak was 25%, but it was more than 80% in the 1989 outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as in the 2005 outbreak in Angola, according to the World Health Organization. Ebola virus. The first known Ebola outbreaks in humans struck simultaneously in the Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo in 1976. Ebola is spread through contact with blood or other body fluids or tissue from infected people or animals. The known strains vary dramatically in their deadliness. One strain, Ebola resin, doesn't even make people sick, but for the Bundibugyo strain, the fatality rate is up to 50% and it is up to 71% for the Sudan strain, according to World Health Organization. The outbreak underway in West Africa began in early 2014, and it is the largest and most complex outbreak of the disease to date, according to WHO. Rabies. Although rabies vaccines for pets, which were introduced in the 1920s, have helped make the disease exceedingly rare in the developed world, this condition remains a serious problem in India and parts of Africa. It destroys the brain. It's a really bad disease. HIV. In the modern world, the deadliest virus of all may be HIV. It is still the one that is the biggest killer. An estimated 36 million people have died from HIV since the disease was first recognized in the early 1980s. The infectious disease that makes the biggest toll on mankind right now is HIV. Powerful antiviral drugs have made it possible for people to live for years with HIV, but the disease continues to devastate many low and middle income countries, where 95% of new HIV infections occur. Nearly 1 in every 20 adults in sub-Saharan Africa is HIV positive, according to WHO. Smallpox. In 1980, the World Health Assembly declared the world free of smallpox, but before that, humans battled smallpox for thousands of years, and the disease killed about 1 in 3 of those it infected. It left survivors with deep, permanent scars and often blindness. Mortality rates were far higher in populations outside of Europe, where people had little contact with the virus before visitors brought it to their regions. For example, historians estimate 90% of the native population of the Americas died from smallpox introduced by European explorers. In the 20th century alone, smallpox killed 300 million people. It was something that had a huge burden on the planet, not just death but also blindness, and that's what spurred the campaign to eradicate it from Earth. Hantavirus. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome (HPS) first gained wide attention in the United States in 1993 when a healthy young Navajo man and his fiancée living in the Four Corners area of the United States died within days of developing shortness of breath. A few months later, health authorities isolated hantavirus from a deer mouse living in the home of one of the infected people. More than 600 people in the United States have now contracted HPS and 36% have died from the disease, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The virus is not transmitted from one person to another, rather people contract the disease from exposure to the droppings of infected mice. Previously, a different hantavirus caused an outbreak in the early 1950s during the Korean War, according to a 2010 paper in the journal Clinical Microbiology Reviews. More than 3,000 troops became infected and about 12% of them died. While the virus was new to Western medicine when it was discovered in the United States, researchers realized later that Navajo medical traditions describe a similar illness and link the disease to mice. Influenza. During a typical flu season, up to 500,000 people worldwide will die from the illness, according to WHO. But occasionally, when a new flu strain emerges, a pandemic results with a faster spread of disease and often higher mortality rates. The most deadly flu pandemic, sometimes called the Spanish flu, began in 1980 and sickened up to 40% of the world's population, killing an estimated 50 million people. I think that it is possible that something like the 1980 flu outbreak could occur again if a new influenza strain found its way in the human population and could be transmitted easily between humans and cause severe illness. We would have a big problem. Dengue. Dengue virus first appeared in the 1950s in the Philippines and Thailand and has since spread throughout the tropical and subtropical regions of the globe. Up to 40% of the world's population now lives in areas where dengue is endemic, and the disease is likely to spread further as the world warms. Dengue sickens 50 to 100 million people a year according to World Health Organization. Although the mortality rate for dengue fever is lower than some other viruses, at 2.5%, the virus can cause an Ebola-like disease called dengue hemorrhagic fever, and that condition has a mortality rate of 20% if left untreated. We really need to think more about dengue virus because it is a real threat to us. There is no current vaccine against dengue, but large clinical trials of an experimental vaccine developed by French drug maker Sanofi have helped promising results. Rotavirus. 2 vaccines are now available to protect children from rotavirus, the leading cause of severe illness among babies and young children. The virus can spread rapidly through what researchers call the fecal-oral route. Although children in the developed world rarely die from rotavirus infection, the disease is a killer in the developing world, where radiation treatments are not widely available. The WHO estimates that worldwide 453,000 children younger than age 5 died from rotavirus infection in 2008, but countries that have introduced the vaccine have reported sharp declines in rotavirus hospitalizations and death.